This year, I've been doubling the performance of the S&P 500. I used to waste hours researching the wrong companies, chasing the wrong trends that I didn't need to chase, costing me thousands of dollars. Ignoring 99% of the market is what has made the biggest difference for me, and it's incredibly easy to do. In this video, I'm showing you how to filter for the top 1% of companies and why it works so well. I'm using stockanalysis.com to narrow down the market using their stock screening tool. There are 5,500 companies on stockanalysis.com, and the very first filter that I'm using is the revenue growth over the last 5 years. Now, in general, past performance does not guarantee future results, but it is definitely an indicator. A company that has been able to successfully increase their revenue, i.e. they're growing over the last 5 years, is more likely to grow in the future than a company that has been shrinking over the last 5 years. So to do this, I like to draw the line at 5%. You can up the line to 10% to filter out even more companies, but I find that a good balance is right at the 5% mark. The reason I choose revenue growth because of this study right here by McKinsey & Co. They mapped 2,200 companies, and they found that not only does shareholder returns increase with economic profit, it's also highly correlated with revenue growth. So right here we can see in the y-axis, they've divided up all the companies by earnings growth quintile. Even companies in the lowest quintile, this bottom row right here, their shareholder returns go up correlated very strongly with revenue growth. We can see that the highest companies in terms of revenue growth increase shareholder returns by 8% per year, while simultaneously being in the lowest quintile of earnings growth. So revenue is incredibly important. After adding in this filter for 5% revenue growth over the last 5 years, we've cut out a little over half the companies in the stock market, according to this stock screener. The second screener that I like to use is free cash flow. I want to see companies that have greater than zero free cash flow. And why do we care about free cash flow? This is the sum of money that a company generates after accounting for all of its cash outflows to support its operations and maintain its capital assets. This is the sum of money that a company uses to grow. So they could use that cash to expand their operations by buying up multiple properties, building another plant. They may use it to acquire other companies through inorganic growth. They might issue that money to investors in the form of a dividend or share buybacks. Essentially, this is the sum of money that is being returned to shareholders. So I like to see companies that are generating this free cash flow. It's also a strong clue that this company is able to grow from their own operations. They have money to spare so that they can use their own profits to expand instead of having to take on more debt or dilute shareholders by issuing more shares of stock. After adding this filter for free cash flow over zero, we're now down to 1,585 stocks out of the original 5,500. And the third screener I like to use is the debt to equity ratio. This again is another clue that the company is able to fund its own operations instead of having to take out a bunch of debt. So the debt to equity is the amount of debt that a company has divided by the ownership or the book value that the shareholders have in the company. A higher debt to equity ratio means that this company has to have more debt compared to what we actually own as shareholders. So I draw the line at 1. I want to see companies that have a debt to equity ratio of less than 1. You can draw that line a little bit lower. You can put it at 0.5. I have found personally that less than 1 is a good balance for me. So after implementing this filter, we're now down to 1,208 stocks. And I just want to show a quick example of what happens when a company has really high debt. We're going to do a quick case study on Carvana. When I go to the ratios tab and I scroll down to the debt to equity ratio, we can see that Carvana has typically had a very high debt to equity ratio. Back in 2017, they went above 1, and then since then they have been consistently higher than a debt to equity ratio of 1. So we're going to be looking at the period between 2017 and 2022. In 2021, their debt to equity ratio peaked at 11. However, A negative debt to equity ratio is actually even worse. What that means is that shareholders have negative equity in the company. It does not mean that they have negative debt. To see how this affects a company, we can look at the number of shares in Carvana. So if I go to their income statement and scroll down to the shares outstanding basic and the shares outstanding diluted, we can see how many millions of shares Carvana has. And when I scroll back to 2017, we have 15 million shares of Carvana. So if I bought one share of Carvana in 2017, already in 2018, they have 30 million shares now outstanding. That means that my one share is now worth half as much as it was. Now, if Carvana was able to increase its market cap by double, then my share price would actually stay the same. Carvana as a whole is worth twice as much, but the public shares are having half of the ownership as they did before. And as I go forward in time, this it spirals out of hand. In 2017, there was 15 million shares. In 2022, there's 101 million shares. And if I forward to 2024, they're now up to 122 million shares. So shareholders have been diluted like crazy because they're having to find liquidity, not from their operations, but from issuing more shares of stock and taking on more debt. How can I see if Carvana is having positive free cash flow? I can go to their cash flow statement and scroll down to their operating cash flow and their capital expenditures. Free cash flow is calculated by taking the operating cash flow and then subtracting out how much money they spend on capital expenditures. So in 2021, they actually lost $2.6 billion from their operations, and then they spent another $550 million on capital expenditures. And then if I scroll down to their free cash flow, we can see that their free cash flow was negative $3 billion. So where does this cash come from? We have to go to their financing cash flow. So we can see that their free cash flow is negative $3 billion. Their financing cash flow is positive 3.5. So they are getting cash from their financing. And if I scroll up to their net debt issued, they issued $3.6 billion in debt. Now this year, they didn't issue any stock, but in the following year and the previous year, they issued about $2.2 billion worth of stock. If I add that together, that's major dilution, and they're increasing their debt like crazy. And when you have a huge amount of debt, it increases your interest payment. So to see the interest payment, I go to the income statement, scroll down a bit to the interest expense right here. So we can see in 2024, this interest expense has been increasing steadily since 2017. In 2024, it is $651 million. If I look at their pre-tax income, it's $400 million. If they didn't have this massive interest expense, then their pre-tax income would more than double. So this is having a major impact on their profits every year, and it's having a major impact on their cash flow. If I go back to the cash flow statement, in 2024, Carvana had $918 million in operating cash flow. Well, that would have been $650 million higher if they didn't have this massive interest expense. So not only does that constantly chip away at how much money they have to grow and expand, it forces them to take on more debt. It forces them to issue more shares of stock. So in order to avoid this harmful cycle to shareholders, I use the previous two screeners, which are the debt to equity and the free cash flow. Free cash flow above 0, debt to equity under 1. And this is going to limit the chances that I'm going to end up with a company that dilutes me and increases their debt levels. The fourth screener that I like to implement is I like to look at only large cap companies. So I filter for market cap over 10 billion. We're now down to just 367 stocks out of the original 5,500. Why do I like to limit it to only large cap? For me, this is mainly about limiting risk. Large cap companies are generally much more stable. They're less likely to go out of business altogether. They're able to weather market downturns much easier. Now, historically, small cap stocks have had greater returns on average, but this is requiring you to have a massively diversified portfolio. So if you're investing in all of the small caps versus all of the large caps, yes, historically, small caps have slightly outperformed large cap companies, but we're looking through the lens of stock picking. If I'm picking just a handful of stocks, I want to do everything I can to limit my downside and find the most consistent and most conservative companies. Because according to Warren Buffett, the number one rule of investing is don't lose money. And the number two rule of investing is don't lose money. So I'm doing everything I can to follow those two rules. So after I implement market cap over 10 billion only, we're down to 367 companies. The next screener that I like to look at is revenue growth projected over the next 5 years. So these previous screeners have been regarding past performance. Now I want to start screening for future projected performance. If I want to invest in a company, I want the analysts to believe in the company. I want it to be in an industry or a sector that's growing. I want it to be a strong company that the analysts believe in. It's not guaranteed to filter out all of the bad companies, but a company that looks good to the analysts is more likely to perform well than a company that looks bad to the analysts. If the analysts think that a company is going to be shrinking over the next 5 years, it just adds another layer of risk that I would like to avoid. So I draw the line at 5% revenue growth projected over the next 5 years. This brings my total pool of stocks down to 226 companies. The next filter I use is not a performance-based filter. This is just for me to keep track of what industries I'm investing in or what sectors I'm investing in. For this filter, I just want to see what sector the companies are in. I'm not filtering for just one particular sector in general. I just want to know. So for instance, if I add the sector filter, I can see that most of the companies on this front page, they're all technology companies. If I go to the next page, once again, they're all technology companies. I have to go to the third page to find even more technology companies. And then the fourth page, finally, I see real estate, just one real estate company, materials, industrials. And page 5, all industrials, healthcare. Page 7 is healthcare. Page 8, we find the financials. We see the energy sector in page 9, the consumer staples, consumer discretionary, lots of consumer discretionary, and communication services. And then on the final page, the remaining communication services. And this filter is not so much for me to find companies that are performing better or worse. It's just for my own diversification purposes. I want to make sure I'm not investing 100% in the technology sector. That way, if something bad happens to just one sector, my portfolio doesn't get wrecked. The final filter is a little bit tricky. Once again, we're looking at future growth, but this time instead of revenue, I want to see future earnings potential. And the best ratio for this is the PEG ratio. Now, the problem with stockanalysis.com PEG ratio is they only take into account 1 year of expected earnings growth. Ideally, I want to see the next 5 years of projected earnings growth. So I can't just do a straight up filter for PEG on this website. The PEG ratio is calculated by taking the price divided by the earnings per share. This is the PE ratio, and then you divide it by the projected earnings per share growth. In general, a company that has a PEG ratio of less than 1 is going to be undervalued. A PEG ratio between 1 and 2 is going to be roughly fairly valued. A PEG ratio between 2 and 3 is starting to get into the overpriced range. And then a PEG ratio above 3 is something that I would just ignore. Now, just because a company has a PEG ratio of above 3, it doesn't mean that it's guaranteed to be overvalued. The company could go on to way outperform the analyst expectations, and then it would have been a great spot to buy it at a PEG ratio of 3. But again, this is about limiting risk. A company that has a PEG ratio of above 3 means that for it to be a good price today, it has to far exceed the analyst expectations. To me, that's just setting myself up for a greater percentage of bad investments. I want to invest in companies that don't have to way outperform the analyst expectations. I want to find companies that just need to perform as expected, and then they'll end up giving me lots of returns. So the way that I calculate the PEG ratio is I use 2 more filters on the screener. I use the PE ratio and the earnings per share growth over the next 5 years. Now, we're currently looking at 229 stocks. I can't put anything in these cells that will automatically calculate this PEG ratio. I have to do this manually. It's very simple. The way you do it is you look at the earnings per share growth over the next 5 years, and you look at the PE ratio, you take the PE ratio and you divide it by this earnings per share growth over the next 5 years. So NVIDIA is going to have a PEG ratio of about 2, meaning that the analysts are expecting a lot of growth out of NVIDIA over the next 5 years. So even though they have a high PE ratio, it's really not that crazy if they're able to perform as the analysts expect. Now, if I scroll down a little bit further and see Palantir right here, Palantir has a PE ratio of 487. The analysts think they're going to grow their earnings over the next 5 years by 64%, that's insane growth. Like, don't get me wrong. The analysts are expecting this company to grow a ton. But if I take the PE ratio divided by the earnings per share, that's about 8. That means they have a PEG ratio of about 8 for their current share price. They would have to way outperform this 63% for this share price to be a fair share price today. So Palantir would be a company that I would absolutely pass up on. In general, I'm looking for companies where the earnings per share growth over the next 5 years is very similar to the PE ratio. So an example of this would be TSM. This is Taiwan Semiconductor Company. They have a PE ratio of about 20 and earnings per share growth over the next 5 years of about 18, which means their PEG ratio is just a little bit above 1. So this would be a company that I would take to the next level, and I would actually do a deep dive. Now, just because a company passes all the filters, it doesn't mean that it's just an automatic investment. I have to take this company to the next step. This filter is a way for me to save time, eliminating 99% of the market, narrowing my focus so that I can just spend my precious research time looking into the companies that have the best possibility of success. So if you're curious to see how I evaluate a company's current valuation to see if they're undervalued or overvalued after they pass through my initial criteria, check out this video right here. Hope to see you there.